Her husband left for his mistress before the twins were born. She woke to the doctor, holding her babies and a flower. My beautiful family, welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Today, my heart feels heavy. I can't help but feel upset because it seems like YouTube is trying to pull us apart, creating distance between us, the way we've always been connected. Lately, it feels like my videos aren't reaching you as they once did. Are you still seeing them in your timeline? I remember when you would like, comment and share, and it would bring us so much closer. But now, it's like the love we've built is slipping through our fingers, and I feel that pain deeply. But today, my beautiful family, let's make a promise together. We won't let this stop us. We will stand strong. Let's like every video, comment from the heart, and share with all the love we can give. Let's show the world how powerful we are when we unite. Let's begin again with love. Andrea Carell gripped the hospital bed rails as another contraction tore through her body. The pain was nothing compared to the hollowness in her chest where her heart should be. Her phone lay silent on the bedside table. 32 unanswered calls to Richard, her husband of 3 years. The husband who should have been beside her, holding her hand, whispering encouragement as she brought their twins into the world. You're doing great, Andrea. I can see the first baby's head. One more big push, Dr. John Douglas urged, his calm voice anchoring her in the storm of pain and abandonment. Andrea screamed as she pushed, tears streaming down her face, not from the physical agony, but from knowing Richard was with her now, with Sophia. The text message had come 5 hours into her labor. I can't do this anymore. Sophia and I are leaving town. This isn't the life I want. I'm sorry. It's a boy, Dr. Douglas announced, lifting the squalling infant. A beautiful, healthy boy. Andrea sobbed as she glimpsed her son, so perfect, so innocent. The nurse quickly took him to be cleaned, while Andrea felt another contraction building. You can do this, Dr. Douglas encouraged, his kind eyes meeting hers with unexpected compassion. Your daughter's ready to meet you, too. 3 pushes later, her daughter entered the world with a fierce cry that echoed the rage and grief in Andrea's heart. The delivery room bustled with activity. Nurses tending to the twins, monitors beeping, soft instructions being exchanged. Yet Andrea had never felt so utterly alone. When both babies were finally placed in her arms, swaddled tightly, in hospital blankets, Andrea stared down at their perfect dark faces. They had her nose, her full lips, but Richard's eyes, a painful reminder of the man who had chosen another woman over his own children. Zion and Zara, she whispered. The names they had chosen together during happier times, names that now she alone would call them by. Dr. Douglas had finished his medical duties but lingered at the foot of her bed. Unlike the nurses whose pitying glances made Andrea feel pathetic, the doctor's gaze held something different. Respect mingled with genuine concern. Is there someone I can call for you, Mrs. Taylor? He asked quietly. Andrea shook her head, her vision blurring with fresh tears. Her mother had passed 2 years ago. Her father lived across the country. Her closest friend was traveling abroad. There's no one, she admitted, the words scraping her raw throat. Dr. Douglas approached cautiously, checking the twins with gentle hands. You're not alone, he said, his voice low and certain. These 2 are here now. And you... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. You're stronger than you can possibly know right now. Andrea looked up at him through tear-blurred vision. How could this stranger sound so convinced of her strength when she felt utterly shattered? He left us, she whispered, saying it aloud for the first time. My husband left us for another woman, today, while I was in labor with his children. Dr. Douglas's jaw tightened briefly, the only indication of his thoughts about a man who could make such a choice. I'm very sorry, he said simply. The absence of empty platitudes was strangely comforting. I trusted him with everything, Andrea continued, unable to stop the words now that they'd started flowing. My heart, my future, my body. We created these babies together, and he—" Her voice broke on a sob. "He couldn't even wait until they were born." Dr. Douglas pulled a chair beside her bed and sat, an unprecedented move that protocol probably didn't sanction. "Sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest betrayals," he said quietly, "but that reflects on their character, not yours." Andrea looked down at her twins, marveling at how her heart could simultaneously feel so full and so hollow. "How am I supposed to do this alone?" she whispered. "One day at a time," Dr. Douglas answered. "Sometimes 1 hour at a time." Something in his tone suggested personal experience with grief. "But you will do it, because they need you to." His gaze shifted to the sleeping newborns. "And from what I've seen today, Mrs. Taylor, you have extraordinary strength." Andrea's room grew quiet as evening settled into night. The twins were taken to the nursery so she could rest, though sleep eluded her. Her mind tortured her with images of Richard and Sophia together while she lay alone in a hospital bed. Had their affair been going on throughout her pregnancy? Had Richard been pretending all those times he'd caressed her swollen belly and talked to his unborn children? When morning light filtered through the blinds, Andrea awoke from a fitful doze to find something unexpected on her bedside table. A single white lily in a slim glass vase, elegant in its simplicity. Beside it lay a small card with neat handwriting. "Your children are beautiful, healthy and perfect, just like their mother. Remember, the most exquisite blossoms often grow from the harshest conditions." Dr. Douglas. Andrea touched the delicate, white petals, a single tear sliding down her cheek, but this tear felt different from yesterday's torrent of grief. This tear acknowledged pain, but carried something else too, a tiny seed of determination. When the nurse brought Zion and Zara back, placing them gently in her arms, Andrea looked into their innocent faces and made a silent vow. Richard Taylor had broken every promise he'd ever made to her, but she would never break the ones she was making now to her children. She would be enough for them. She would give them everything they needed, and she would never, ever give anyone the power to destroy her heart again. She didn't notice Dr. Douglas, watching briefly from the doorway, his expression thoughtful, as he observed the beautiful young mother holding her twins with newfound resolve. In her tear-stained face, he turned away, continuing his rounds, unaware that their paths would cross again, or how significant that white lily would become in the story they had yet to write together. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Guardian 4 years. Passed like a whirlwind of sleepless nights, first steps, and hard-won victories. Andrea Carell had transformed from a broken-hearted new mother into a fiercely capable woman who built her life around her twins, Zion and Zara. On this particular Sunday afternoon, she knelt in the grass of the community park, camera in hand, capturing another family's joy while her children played nearby under her friend Tanya's watchful eye. Beautiful. Now just turn toward each other a little more, Andrea instructed the engaged couple, posing beneath a flowering dogwood. Photography had become her salvation and livelihood, a career flexible enough for single motherhood that still fulfilled her creative spirit. As she clicked the shutter, Andrea caught sight of Zion and Zara from the corner of her eye, their matching denim overalls and bright smiles making her heart swell. 4 years old and already inseparable, they were the light that had guided her through the darkest time of her life. "That's perfect. I think we've got everything we need," Andrea told the happy couple, who were blissfully entangled in each other's arms. She ignored the familiar pang in her chest, that whisper of what might have been if Richard had truly loved her the way this man clearly adored his fiancée. Andrea packed her equipment, while the couple scrolled through preview images on her tablet. These engagement photos would help pay next month's rent on their small but comfortable apartment. Between her growing photography business and the meager child support Richard occasionally remembered to send, they were surviving, though thriving still felt just out of reach. "Mommy! Mommy! Look what we found!" Zara's excited voice called. Across the park, Andrea turned to see her daughter running toward her, something clutched in her small palm. Zion trailed behind, his expression concerned rather than excited. "What is it, baby?" Andrea smiled, kneeling to meet her daughter at eye level. Zara opened her hand to reveal a peanut butter cookie, already half-eaten. "The nice lady gave us cookies." Andrea's smile froze. "What lady, Zara? You know you're not supposed to take food from strangers." "The lady with the doggy," Zion explained, pointing toward a woman walking a golden retriever on the far side of the park. "Tanya?" Andrea called, looking around for her friend, who had been watching the twins. "Just ran to the restroom," Zion answered with the matter-of-factness that made him seem older than his 4 years. A chill ran through Andrea as she turned back to Zara, who was now scratching at her arm where small red hives were beginning to form. "Zara, honey, are you feeling okay?" "My throat feels funny," Zara said, her voice suddenly hoarse. Then, with terrifying speed, her breathing became labored, wheezy gasps escaping her lips. "Zara!" Andrea cried as her daughter's face began to swell, panic exploding in her chest. "Help! Somebody help us!" Andrea scooped Zara into her arms, frantically searching her purse for the EpiPen she always carried due to Zara's known peanut allergy. But her photography bag had replaced her regular purse today, and with sickening clarity, Andrea realized the EpiPen was in her other bag at home. "Call 911!" she screamed to the couple still reviewing their photos. The woman immediately pulled out her phone while her fiancé ran toward Andrea. "What's happening?" he asked, eyes wide at the sight of Zara's rapidly swelling face. "Peanut allergy, severe. Need EpiPen," Andrea managed between panicked breaths, clutching Zara, whose lips were now taking on a bluish tint. "Does anyone have an EpiPen?" the man shouted to the scattered parkgoers. "Emergency, we need an EpiPen." Andrea rocked Zara, her throat constricting with fear. "Stay with me, baby. Please, Zara, stay with me." Zion stood frozen beside them, his small face contorted with fear. "I'm a doctor. Let me through." A deep voice cut through the growing crowd. A tall man in running clothes pushed forward, immediately kneeling beside Andrea and Zara. "Anaphylaxis?" he asked, already assessing Zara with practiced efficiency. "Yes, peanut allergy. She ate a cookie." Andrea gasped, willing to trust anyone who might save her daughter. The man pulled a small case from his running belt and extracted an EpiPen. "I'm Dr. John Douglas, Pediatric Emergency Medicine. I need to give her epinephrine. Hold her still." Andrea nodded frantically, cradling Zara while the doctor administered the injection into her thigh. The needle's spring-loaded click seemed deafening in the tense silence. "The ambulance is 3 minutes out," someone called from the crowd. Dr. Douglas kept his fingers on Zara's pulse, his focus absolute. "What's her name?" "Zara," Andrea whispered. "Zara Grace Taylor." Something flickered across the doctor's face, a flash of recognition quickly masked by professional concern. "Zara, you're very brave," he said to the little girl. "The medicine is going to help you breathe better soon." Gradually, terrifyingly slowly, Zara's breathing eased. The blue tinge receded from her lips, though her face remained swollen. "Thank you," Andrea said, relief making her voice unsteady. "Thank you so much." Dr. Douglas finally looked directly at Andrea, and their eyes met fully for the first time. The strange sense of familiarity intensified. Where had she seen those kind, serious eyes before? "Andrea," he said quietly, her name a question on his lips. Before she could respond, sirens wailed in the distance. Dr. Douglas turned toward the sound, then back to Andrea. "The epinephrine is temporary. She needs to go to the hospital immediately for monitoring and additional treatment." Andrea nodded, gathering Zion close with her free arm. "Of course. I'll ride with you," Dr. Douglas said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Sometimes a second dose is needed, and I have one." The ambulance arrived in a flash of lights and controlled chaos. As paramedics transferred Zara to a stretcher, Andrea clung to Zion with one hand and her daughter's small fingers with the other. "You're going to be okay, Zara Bear," she promised, using the nickname that usually made her daughter giggle. Now Zara only blinked tiredly, the epinephrine making her both better and shaky. Inside the ambulance, as it raced toward the hospital, Andrea finally had a moment to truly look at the doctor who had saved her daughter's life. His face tugged at her memory, something about his eyes, the way they held compassion without pity. "Do we know each other?" she asked hesitantly. Dr. Douglas smiled slightly. "You don't remember me. That's understandable. It was a difficult day." He paused, monitoring Zara's vitals as he spoke. "I delivered your twins, Ms. Carell, 4 years ago." The memory crashed over Andrea. The hospital room, her broken heart, the twins' birth, and a single white lily beside her bed. "Dr. Douglas," she whispered, recognition dawning, "you left me the flower." He nodded once, his attention returning to Zara as the ambulance turned sharply. "I'm glad I was running in the park today," he said simply. Andrea stared at him, struck by the impossible coincidence. Of all the doctors in the city, how could it be that the one who had witnessed her at her most vulnerable was the very one who happened to save her daughter years later? The ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance, and in the rush to get Zara inside, Andrea had no time to dwell on the strange twist of fate that had brought Dr. Douglas back into their lives. All that mattered now was Zara's recovery. But as they wheeled her daughter into the treatment room, Andrea couldn't help noticing how naturally Zion had slipped his small hand into Dr. Douglas's larger one, trusting this stranger who had saved his twin. And something in the gentle way the doctor accommodated the little boy's grip, slowing his stride to match Zion's shorter steps, made Andrea's carefully guarded heart skip a beat. Unknown to Andrea, it wouldn't be the last time Dr. John Douglas would appear in their lives like a guardian angel. And the next gift he left, another white lily on their doorstep exactly 1 week later, on the twins' birthday, would be the first step on a journey neither of them could have anticipated. Chapter 3. Recognition and Resistance. The community health fair buzzed with activity under the warm spring sunshine. Andrea adjusted her camera settings as she photographed families getting free checkups, children having their faces painted, and healthcare workers offering guidance at various stations. The local hospital had hired her to document the event, a job she desperately needed after Zara's medical bills had strained her already tight budget. "Mummy, can we get snow cones?" Zion tugged at her sleeve, pointing to a colorful stand where a line of excited children waited. "After I finish this section," Andrea promised, snapping a few more photos of an elderly couple receiving blood pressure screenings. "Stay where I can see you both, okay?" The twins nodded solemnly. At 4 years old, they understood their mother's rules about staying close in public places. The incident at the park 2 months ago had left its mark on all of them, especially Zara, who now wore a medical alert bracelet and carried her own child-sized allergy awareness backpack with emergency medication. Andrea watched her children settle on a nearby bench, their little legs swinging in unison. Her heart swelled with love and pride at their resilience. After that terrifying day at the park, both twins had spent 8 hours in the hospital, while Zara received treatment and observation. Throughout it all, Dr. Douglas had stayed close, checking on Zara between his other patients, bringing Zion juice boxes, and quietly ensuring Andrea had everything she needed. She'd been too overwhelmed to fully process who he was then. Only, grateful for his help, He disappeared before discharge, called away to an emergency, leaving Andrea with questions she hadn't known she wanted to ask. "Zara! Zion, look who's here!" Andrea turned toward the excited voice to see a nurse she recognized from the hospital kneeling beside her children. Next to the nurse stood Dr. Douglas himself, wearing khakis and a blue button-down instead of scrubs or running clothes. His smile as he greeted the twins transformed his normally serious face, revealing dimples she hadn't noticed before. Andrea lowered her camera slowly, watching as both her children practically bounced with excitement. Clearly, recognizing the doctor, Zion high-fived him enthusiastically while Zara showed off her medical bracelet. Their comfort with him seemed oddly established for having met him only once during an emergency. She approached cautiously, camera clutched to her chest like a shield. "Dr. Douglas, what a surprise." He straightened, his smile softening but remaining. "Ms. Carell, nice to see you all again. Zara was just showing me her new alert bracelet. Very impressive." "It's Ms. Carell now, actually," Andrea corrected. Having reclaimed her maiden name in the divorce proceedings Richard had finally completed 6 months ago. "I didn't realize you'd be here today. I'm running the pediatric screening booth," he explained, gesturing to a tent several yards away festooned with colorful balloons. "We're checking growth markers, doing simple vision tests, that sort of thing." He hesitated, then added, "I was actually hoping to see you all here. I wanted to check how Zara's been doing." Something in his tone snagged Andrea's attention, a familiarity that felt unearned, given their limited interactions. "She's doing well, thank you. We're much more careful about exposing her to potential allergens now." Zion tugged at Dr. Douglas's hand. "Dr. John, will you have lunch with us, Mommy?" "Made sandwiches, Dr. John?" Andrea's eyebrows rose at the casual nickname. Dr. Douglas glanced at her, something like guilt flickering across his features. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your family time." "Please?" Zara added, her big brown eyes pleading. "How do they know you so well?" Andrea asked quietly, suspicion growing. Before he could answer, an announcement blared through the speakers requesting all medical volunteers return to their stations for the afternoon shift. "Saved by the bell," he murmured, then louder to the twins. "I have to get back to work, but maybe I'll see you later, okay?" As he turned to leave, Andrea made a split-second decision. "We'll be having lunch by the oak tree at the edge of the field in about an hour. If you'd like to join us and explain how my children seem to know you so well, you're welcome to." His eyes held hers for a moment, and Andrea felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. "I'll be there," he promised. Andrea spread a blanket under the massive oak tree, setting out sandwiches and fruit, while the twins played with sidewalk chalk nearby. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. Had Dr. Douglas been checking up on her children? Why? A chill ran through her despite the warm day. Was Richard somehow involved? She spotted him approaching across the field and straightened, determined to get answers. "Thank you for inviting me," he said, sitting down at the edge of the blanket when she gestured for him to join them. "Zion, Zara, lunchtime," she called. The twins raced over, delighted to find Dr. Douglas there. "Dr. John, did you bring copper?" Zara asked eagerly. "Who's copper?" Andrea asked, her voice sharp with growing concern. Dr. Douglas winced slightly. "My golden retriever. And no, Zara, no dogs allowed at the health fair, remember?" "How does my daughter know about your dog?" Andrea demanded quietly as the twins dug into their sandwiches. He took a deep breath. "I think I owe you an explanation." "Yes, you do. After the incident at the park, I was concerned about Zara's follow-up. Care. I live in Oakwood Commons, the same complex as you." He watched her expression shift from suspicion to surprise. "I noticed you and the twins at the playground there a few weeks after her allergic reaction. I just wanted to make sure she was fully recovered." "So you've been watching us?" Andrea's protective instincts flared. "Not in a creepy way," he assured her quickly. "I wore copper there every evening. The twins recognized me one day and came over to pet him. After that, they'd look for us." His expression grew apologetic. "I should have approached you directly, but you always seemed guarded." "I wonder why," she retorted, memories of Richard's betrayal hovering like a shadow. "It was the white lily, wasn't it?" she asked suddenly. "On their birthday. That was you." He nodded, unable to deny it. "I remembered the date from their medical records." Why? The question contained all her confusion. Why would this man, this virtual stranger, care enough to remember her children's birthday? To anonymously leave their favorite flower? Dr. Douglas looked at the twins, now chattering happily as they ate. "I've never forgotten the day they were born," he said quietly. "The strength you showed, facing that moment alone. How you held them, both, and promised to be everything they needed." His eyes met hers, unexpectedly intense. "Some patients stay with you. Your family was one of them." Andrea felt her carefully constructed defenses wavering. "That doesn't explain why you've been secretly checking on us for months." "I haven't been checking on them," he corrected gently. "I've been checking on all of you." The implication hung in the air between them, that his interest wasn't merely professional concern for former patients, but something more personal, something potentially dangerous to the walls Andrea had built around her heart. "I think you should stop," she said firmly, ignoring the way the twins' faces fell at her tone. "We appreciate your medical assistance with Zara's emergency, but we don't need a guardian angel or whatever this is." Dr. Douglas absorbed her rejection with quiet dignity. "I understand. I overstepped." He turned to the twins with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It was nice having lunch with you. Both take good care of your mom, okay?" As he stood to leave, Zion suddenly grabbed his hand. "But who will bring us special rocks if you don't come to the playground anymore?" Andrea's gaze snapped to her son. "What special rocks?" "The shiny ones," Zara explained excitedly. "Dr. John finds them in the creek behind the building. He says they're magic wishing stones." Dr. Douglas looked genuinely embarrassed now. "Just some polished river rocks." The twins mentioned they like collecting things, so Andrea felt simultaneously touched and terrified by these revelations. This man had been quietly becoming a presence in her children's lives while she remained unaware. The thought should have angered her more than it did. Instead, she found herself wondering what it said about her that her children had so eagerly accepted kindness from a virtual stranger. Was there a void in their lives she hadn't recognized? "Dr. Douglas." "John, please," he interrupted gently. "Dr. Douglas," she repeated firmly. "I need to think about all this. It's a lot to process." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. For what it's worth, I never intended to invade your privacy or overstep boundaries. He glanced at the twins, now back to their lunch. "They're special children. And you." His gaze returned to her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're an extraordinary mother. Sometimes I just wanted to make things a little easier, in whatever small way I could." After he left, Andrea sat watching her children, his words echoing in her mind. No one had called her extraordinary since before Richard left. The compliment lodged in her chest like a warm coal, dangerous and comforting all at once. That evening, as she tucked the twins into bed, Zara asked in a small voice, "Is Dr. John not our friend anymore, Mummy?" Andrea smoothed her daughter's curls back from her forehead. "It's complicated, sweetie. But he saved me," Zara insisted with the simple logic of childhood, "and he tells the best stories about the brave twin explorers." "Twins like us," Zion added sleepily from his bed. Andrea's heart constricted. How many stories had this man told her children? How many quiet kindnesses had he extended that she knew nothing about? Later, standing on her small balcony overlooking the playground, Andrea caught sight of a tall figure walking a golden retriever in the moonlight. Without thinking, she raised her hand in a hesitant wave. After a moment's pause, Dr. Douglas, John, waved back. The fluttering sensation returned to her stomach, accompanied by a warning bell in her mind. She was not ready to trust again, especially not a man who had been watching her family from the shadows, regardless of his intentions. Yet as she turned away from the balcony, Andrea couldn't deny the smallest crack had formed in the walls around her heart, a crack that terrified and intrigued her in equal measure. Chapter 4. The First Dance. The Cherry Blossom Festival transformed Oakwood Park into a fairyland of pink and white blossoms, paper lanterns, and twinkling lights strung between trees. Andrea adjusted her camera settings to capture the magical atmosphere as families strolled among food stalls and children played traditional games. "Ms. Carell, over here!" Andrea turned to see Mrs. Winters, the twins' preschool director, waving. Enthusiastically, she approached with a smile, grateful for the woman who had arranged a scholarship to help with the twins' tuition. "The photos you took for our brochure were magnificent," Mrs. Winters gushed. "The board was so impressed, they've asked if you'd document tonight's festival for next year's promotional materials. We can pay your usual rate." Andrea's smile widened. "I'd be delighted. Thank you." "Excellent. Oh, and have you met our newest volunteer?" Mrs. Winters gestured behind her, where Dr. John Douglas stood helping a little boy fish for prizes at a game booth. "Dr. Douglas has been reading to the children every Thursday. The kids absolutely adore him." Andrea's smile faltered. It had been 3 weeks since their confrontation at the health fair. 3 weeks of deliberately avoiding the playground during evening hours, of pretending not to notice when the twins asked about Dr. John, with increasing frequency. "Yes, we've met," Andrea replied, watching as John handed the boy a small stuffed dragon with a congratulatory high five. Mrs. Winters leaned closer. "Between us, he specifically asked when he volunteered if the Taylor twins were in our program. Seems quite fond of your little ones." Before Andrea could respond, Zion and Zara, who had been exploring nearby with Tanya, spotted John and raced toward him with excited squeals. Andrea watched with a mixture of concern and grudging admiration as he knelt to their level, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure at their enthusiasm. "I should go collect my children," Andrea murmured, excusing herself. As she approached, John stood up, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Ms. Carell, good evening." "Dr. Douglas," she acknowledged coolly. "I didn't know you volunteered at their preschool." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "It started recently. I read medical picture books to the children, teaching them about how the body works, what happens at checkups, that sort of thing." "Dr. John does the best voices," Zara informed her mother earnestly, "especially for the grumpy liver who doesn't want to filter toxins." Despite herself, Andrea's lips twitched at the absurdity. A grumpy liver. "He wears a bow tie and everything," John explained with a small smile. "Very dignified organ, the liver." The tension between them eased fractionally as the twins began recounting their favorite parts of his stories. Andrea studied him as he listened attentively to their rambling explanations. In the soft glow of the lanterns, with cherry blossoms occasionally drifting down around them, she couldn't deny he was handsome. His strong jaw softened by kind eyes, his professional demeanor balanced by the gentle way he interacted with children. "Can Dr. John have dinner with us?" Zion asked suddenly. "We're getting noodles from the food truck." Andrea hesitated, but before she could formulate a gentle refusal, the festival band began playing, and an announcer's voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Cherry Blossom Dance begins in 5 minutes. Bring your partners to the central pavilion. A dance!" Zara clapped excitedly. "Mummy, can we watch the dancing?" Grateful for the distraction, Andrea nodded. "Let's find Tanya first, then we'll go watch." "Actually," John interjected hesitantly, "would you like to dance, Miss Carrel?" The unexpected invitation caught Andrea completely off guard. I don't dance." "Everyone dances," he replied with a small smile. "Some of us just need the right partner." Something in his tone, respectful yet gently challenging, sparked a long dormant flutter in Andrea's chest. Before she could overthink it, Tanya appeared at her side. "I'll watch these munchkins if you want to dance," she offered, having overheard the exchange. "Go on, Andrea. When's the last time you did something just for fun?" Put that way, Andrea couldn't remember. Between work, parenting, and constantly worrying about finances, fun had become a foreign concept. One dance, she conceded, not meeting John's eyes. For the festival photographs, his smile was worth the momentary vulnerability. The central pavilion glowed with string lights and paper lanterns, creating a warm circle of light as couples gathered for the traditional dance. The band played a gentle waltz, and Andrea suddenly felt painfully out of place in her casual jeans and light sweater among women in flowing dresses. "We don't have to do this," she murmured, self-consciousness flooding her as John led her to the edge of the dance floor. "Do you trust me?" he asked quietly, holding out his hand. "I barely know you," she replied honestly. His eyes held hers steadily. "Fair enough. Let me rephrase. Would you be willing to try?" Andrea hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and secure without being possessive. Carefully, he guided her into the basic waltz position, maintaining a respectful distance between their bodies. "Just follow my lead," he murmured near her ear. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. At first, Andrea focused solely on not stepping on his feet, her body stiff with tension. But gradually, as they moved together through the gentle rhythm, something shifted. John guided her with subtle pressure from his hand at her waist, anticipating her movements before she made them, creating a harmony that felt almost inevitable. "You're good at this," she admitted reluctantly. "My mother insisted all her children learn ballroom dancing," he explained with a smile. "Said it taught discipline and respect." "How many siblings do you have?" Andrea found herself asking, genuinely curious about this man who had woven himself so mysteriously into her family's life. "2 sisters, both older and both doctors. It's something of a family tradition." As they turned beneath the canopy of lights and blossoms, Andrea gradually relaxed into the dance. The weight of single motherhood, financial stress, and lingering betrayal seemed to lighten with each step. For the first time in years, she was simply a woman dancing beneath the stars, held securely in the arms of a man who looked at her as though she were something precious. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. John must have sensed the change in her because his hand tightened slightly at her waist, drawing her incrementally closer as the music swelled. Andrea didn't resist. Instead, she found herself studying the contours of his face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the slight cleft in his chin, the way his expression softened whenever he looked at her. "Why?" she asked suddenly, the question that had plagued her. For weeks, finally escaping, he didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Why you? Why your family?" She nodded, their bodies still moving in perfect synchronization, despite the serious turn of conversation. John was quiet for several moments, guiding her through a gentle turn, before answering. "I've delivered hundreds of babies in my career, but I've never forgotten that night. Your courage, your heartbreak, your determination. When I saw you again at the park with your children, it felt like—" He paused, searching for words. "Like being given a rare second chance to witness how a story unfolds." "So, we're just an interesting story to you?" Andrea's defenses rose immediately. "No," he corrected gently. You're extraordinary people who touched my life unexpectedly. I didn't plan to become involved, but once I met the twins again—" He shrugged slightly. "They're pretty irresistible." "They are," Andrea agreed, softening despite herself. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate. Couples around them drew closer, and Andrea suddenly became acutely aware of the space between their bodies, space that felt both necessary and somehow wrong. "I should check on the twins," she murmured, though she made no move to step away. "There, right there," John replied, nodding toward the edge of the pavilion where Zion and Zara sat on a bench with Tanya, happily eating cotton candy while watching the dancers. When they spotted their mother looking their way, they waved enthusiastically. Andrea waved back, smiling at their sticky blue faces. "I'm not ready," she admitted quietly, returning her attention to John. "For what?" he asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew. "For this. Whatever this is." She gestured vaguely between them. "I have the twins to think about. They've already been abandoned by one important man in their lives." "I would never," he began. "You can't promise that," she interrupted. "No one can. Life happens. People change their minds." The music was drawing to a close, and Andrea felt a strange reluctance to have the dance end, to break this unexpected connection that had formed between them. John guided her through one final turn, then surprised her by drawing her slightly, closer as the last notes played. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, and Andrea felt her heart skip several beats as the air between them seemed to charge with possibility. For one breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. For one terrifying moment, she wanted him to. "Mummy! Dr. John! We saved you cotton candy!" Zion's voice pierced the spell as he and Zara bounded onto the dance floor, effectively ending the moment. John stepped back, releasing her with visible reluctance. "Thank you for the dance, Ms. Carell." "Andrea," she corrected, the name an offering of sorts. "I think, after everything, you can call me Andrea." His smile was like sunrise. "Andrea," he repeated, as though testing the privilege of using her name. As the twins dragged them toward the cotton candy stand, chattering excitedly about the dance they had witnessed, Andrea caught John watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Tenderness mingled with something deeper, more patient, more determined than she was prepared to acknowledge. Later that night, after putting the overtired twins to bed, Andrea stood on her balcony again. The festival lights still glimmered in the distance, and the memory of being in John's arms lingered like a phantom sensation against her skin. She was not ready to trust again. She was not ready to risk her heart, or, more importantly, her children's. Hearts on a man, any man, even one as seemingly perfect as Dr. John Douglas. But as she turned to go inside, Andrea caught sight of a small white lily in a simple glass vase, placed carefully on her doorstep, identical to the one that had appeared beside her hospital bed on the worst day of her life. Despite her reservations, despite the warning bells, Andrea smiled as she brought the flower inside, its sweet fragrance filling her small apartment with the undeniable scent of possibility. Chapter 5. Storm and Shelter. "Mommy, are the big winds going to blow our house away?" Zara's eyes were wide with fear as she clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. Andrea turned from taping the windows of their apartment, forcing a reassuring smile despite her own anxiety. Hurricane Eliza had strengthened overnight, transforming from a tropical storm into a Category 3 hurricane headed directly for their coastal town. Evacuation orders had been issued for beachfront properties, while inland residents like Andrea were advised to shelter in place. "No, sweetie. Our house is strong," she promised, though the apartment building's maintenance issues made her less confident than she sounded. "We'll be okay. We have our emergency kit, flashlights, and plenty of snacks." Zion looked up from arranging their collection of battery-operated candles. Miss Winter said the hurricane might make the power go out. It might, Andrea acknowledged, checking her phone for the latest update. The storm was expected to make landfall in 6 hours, with the worst conditions hitting overnight. But remember our practice? We'll make a blanket fort and pretend we're camping. A sharp knock on the door startled all three of them. Andrea wasn't expecting anyone. Most of her neighbors had left to stay with family further inland. Andrea, it's John. May I speak with you? The twins perked up immediately at the sound of Dr. Douglas's voice. Since the Cherry Blossom Festival 3 weeks ago, he had maintained a respectful distance while remaining friendly, waving from across the playground, chatting briefly during his volunteer sessions at the preschool, but never pushing for more than Andrea seemed comfortable with. She opened the door to find him looking uncharacteristically disheveled, concern etched across his features. "Are you planning to stay here during the hurricane?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, we've prepared. This building's roof was already compromised in the last storm," he interrupted, his normally calm demeanor replaced with urgency. "The maintenance reports were filed, but repairs were never completed. It's not safe," Andrea frowned. "How do you know that?" "My sister's on the town council. I called her when I saw the hurricane's projected path." He glanced at the twins, then lowered his voice. "Andrea, please. My house is on higher ground, with impact-resistant windows and a generator. I'm inviting you and the twins to weather the storm there." Fear and pride warred within her. The thought of facing the hurricane in their apartment suddenly seemed foolish, with her children's safety at stake. Yet accepting meant placing herself in a position of vulnerability, owing John, being in his private space, crossing boundaries she'd carefully maintained. "Dr. John!" Zion exclaimed, spotting him from where he'd been arranging candles. "Are you here to help with the hurricane?" John's expression softened as he knelt to the little boy's level. "That's exactly why I'm here, buddy. I thought maybe you, your sister, and your mom might want to have a hurricane sleepover at my house. It's very strong, and I even have a special room where storms can't scare us." "Like a secret fort?" Zara asked, inching closer. "Even better. It's a reinforced interior room with no windows, perfect for hurricanes, and for building blanket forts inside." Andrea watched her children's eyes light up at the prospect, their earlier fear replaced with excitement. How did he always know exactly what to say to them? "We can pack quickly," she conceded, making her decision. "But we're bringing our own supplies. I don't want to impose." John's relief was palpable. "Thank you, and you're not imposing. I invited you." He checked his watch. "The roads will be closing in a few hours. I'll help you pack." John's house was nothing like Andrea had imagined. Instead of the sleek bachelor pad she'd expected, the 2-story craftsman home was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture, shelves filled with books, and surprisingly child-friendly spaces. "It was my grandparents' home," he explained as he showed them around. "I renovated it after medical school, but kept the character." The twins explored with excited curiosity, while Andrea took in details that revealed more about the man than he perhaps intended. Medical journals, alongside classic literature, framed photographs of what appeared to be his large extended family, a piano in the corner with sheet music open. "You play?" "You," she asked, nodding toward the instrument. "Badly," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "But it relaxes me after difficult days at the hospital." The domesticity of the scene, her children exploring his home, John offering them shelter from the storm, created an intimacy that made Andrea simultaneously comfortable and uneasy. It felt too natural, too right, too much like something she'd given up hoping for. "The hurricane room is downstairs," John explained, leading them to a reinforced space he'd created in the basement. "It's connected to the generator, so we'll have power even if the rest of the town loses electricity." The storm arrived sooner than predicted, winds screaming around the house by early evening. Though John's sturdy home barely trembled under the hurricane's assault, the noise was terrifying. As darkness fell and the power predictably failed, they retreated to the hurricane room, where the generator kept essential lights and systems running. True to his word, John helped the twins construct an elaborate blanket fort in the middle of the room, complete with pillows, battery-operated fairy lights, and space for their stuffed animals. He produced a stack of board games that kept them entertained as the storm raged above. "They adore you," Andrea observed quietly as they sat, watching the twins play a simplified version of checkers inside their fort. "It's like they've known you their whole lives." John's gaze remained on the children, though his expression turned reflective. "Kids have good instincts about people, better than adults sometimes." "What does that mean?" she asked, unsure if she should be offended. He turned to her then, his eyes holding hers with gentle challenge. "It means children haven't learned to let fear disguise itself as caution yet." The observation struck uncomfortably close to home. "Fear serves a purpose," she argued softly. "It protects us from repeating painful mistakes." "True," he acknowledged, "but it can also prevent us from experiencing joy." Before Andrea could respond, a particularly violent gust shook the house, causing the lights to flicker. The twins emerged up from their fort with worried expressions. "Is the house going to break?" Zara asked, climbing into Andrea's lap. "No, sweetheart. Dr. John's house is very strong," Andrea assured her, brushing back dark curls from her daughter's forehead. "Who wants hot chocolate?" John offered, deftly changing the subject. "I have a camping stove we can use right here." The distraction worked, and soon they were all sipping from steaming mugs as John recounted exaggerated tales of storms he'd weathered in his youth. The twins were enthralled, their earlier fears forgotten as he spun storms into adventures rather than threats. Eventually, the excitement of the day caught up with the children. They fell asleep in their blanket fort, curled together like puppies amid their pillows and stuffed animals. Andrea and John sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm above and the gentle breathing of the twins below. "Thank you," she said finally, "for insisting we come here, for making this an adventure for them rather than a trauma." "You're welcome," he replied simply, "though I suspect you'd have found a way to make it magical for them even in your apartment. You're an amazing mother, Andrea." The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the hot chocolate. "They make it easy. They're remarkable children." "They are," he agreed. "But they've become that way because of you. Your strength, your unwavering love, your determination to protect them from the pain of their father's abandonment." At the mention of Richard, Andrea tensed slightly. "How much do you know about that?" John hesitated. "Only what you told me the night they were born. That your husband left you for another woman while you were in labor." Andrea stared into her empty mug, memories she usually kept carefully locked away suddenly rising to the surface. "We'd been trying for a baby for 2 years. When we found out it was twins, Richard seemed thrilled. He painted the nursery himself, bought 2 of everything." Her voice grew tight. "Later I learned he'd already been seeing Sophia for months. He was just waiting for the right time to leave." "The right time being when you were literally bringing his children into the world," John said, anger evident beneath his controlled tone. "He texted me during labor," Andrea continued, somehow needing to share the full horror of it now that she'd started. "Said he was sorry, but he and Sophia were leaving town to start over. That he'd be in touch about child support." She laughed bitterly. "He sends checks sometimes, usually months late and never the full amount. Calls on their birthday if he remembers." "The twins deserve better," John said quietly. "And so do you." Andrea lifted her gaze to his. In the soft, emergency lighting, with the storm raging outside and her children sleeping safely nearby, she felt a dangerous lowering of her defenses. "What if I don't know how to choose better? What if I'm broken in ways that can't be fixed?" John moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not broken, Andrea. Wounded, yes, cautious, understandably. but not broken. She wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps they both leaned in simultaneously, drawn together by the intimacy of shared confidences and the primal comfort of connection during a storm. His fingers brushed her cheek with reverence, and Andrea felt her eyes flutter closed at the tenderness of his touch. When their lips finally met, it wasn't the passionate collision she'd half expected. Instead, John kissed her with exquisite gentleness, as though she were something precious and fragile. His restraint, his clear desire to let her set the pace, undid her more thoroughly than any display of passion could have. Andrea's hands found their way to his shoulders, then his neck, fingers threading through his hair as the kiss deepened. Years of locked-away desire awakened under his touch, and she gasped softly against his mouth as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Andrea felt dizzy with conflicting emotions, desire, and fear, hope, and caution warring within her. "I've wanted to do that since the Cherry Blossom Festival," John admitted, his voice husky. "Actually, since I saw you again at the park." Andrea pressed her forehead against his, eyes closed, heart racing. "This terrifies me," she whispered. "The twins adore you already. If this goes wrong—" "It won't," he promised, though they both knew such guarantees were impossible. "You can't know that." He pulled back slightly to meet her gaze. "You're right. I can't predict the future. But I can tell you this. I would never willingly hurt you or the twins. Whatever happens between us, I will never simply disappear from their lives the way their father did." The declaration, spoken with such conviction, broke something open inside. Andrea, a small, cautious bloom of hope she'd thought permanently withered. The storm continued to rage above them. But within the safe confines of the hurricane room, wrapped in John's arms, with her children sleeping peacefully nearby, Andrea allowed herself to imagine a different kind of future than the lonely one she'd resigned herself to. As if reading her thoughts, John brushed his lips against her temple. "One day at a time," he murmured. "No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." "Possibility," Andrea echoed, the word both promise and prayer, as they held each other while the hurricane slowly spent its fury above. Chapter 6. The First. Heartbreak 6 months had passed since Hurricane Eliza had forced Andrea and the twins to seek shelter with John. 6 months of careful steps forward as their relationship deepened naturally, organically, not rushed by passion or convenience, but built thoughtfully, with the twins' well-being always at the center. They had established a comfortable rhythm. Tuesday night dinners at his place, Saturday morning pancakes at hers, trips to the museum with the twins on alternate weekends. John had become a fixture in their lives, his medical textbooks gradually finding space on her bookshelves, his spare toothbrush appearing in her bathroom, his favorite coffee in her kitchen cabinet. The transition had been so seamless that Andrea sometimes caught herself startled by how thoroughly he had integrated into their world. With each shared moment, John teaching Zion to ride a bike without training wheels, helping Zara overcome her fear of thunderstorms, bringing Andrea tea. When she worked late on photo edits, he had proven himself different from Richard in every way that mattered. Where Richard had been charming but self-centered, John was genuine and attentive. Where Richard had made grand promises he never kept, John followed through on even the smallest commitments. Most importantly, where Richard had loved the idea of family more than the day-to-day reality, John embraced every aspect. The tantrums along with the triumphs, the mundane routines along with the milestone moments. Tonight, as Andrea applied the finishing touches to her makeup, she marveled at how much had changed. The children now asked for Dr. John daily, their faces lighting up whenever he appeared. Her own heart raced embarrassingly when she heard his voice, his gentle kisses still sending electricity through her body months after their first. "Mommy, you look like a princess," Zara declared from the doorway of Andrea's bedroom, where she'd been watching her mother prepare with fascinated admiration. Andrea smiled at her daughter's reflection in the mirror. "Thank you, sweetie. Is Tanya here yet?" "She's helping Zion. I find his dinosaur pajamas," Zara reported. "Are you and Dr. John having a special date?" "Yes, very special," Andrea confirmed, securing a pair of silver earrings, a birthday gift from John last month. He had remembered her mentioning once that she loved silver jewelry but rarely bought it for herself. The doorbell rang, and Zara raced to answer it with an excited squeal. Andrea heard John's warm greeting, followed by Zion's enthusiastic account of the frog they'd found at the playground that afternoon. She emerged from the bedroom to find John kneeling at eye level with the twins, listening with complete attention to their story. He wore a charcoal grey suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, a crisp white shirt, and a blue tie that somehow matched her dress perfectly, though they hadn't coordinated. His eyes found hers across the room, and the admiration in his gaze made her cheeks warm. After 6 months, he still looked at her like she was a revelation. "You're beautiful," he said simply, rising to greet her. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Dr. Douglas," she replied, accepting his kiss on her cheek, appropriately restrained in front of the children, though his lingering touch promised more later. Tanya emerged from the twins' bedroom with exaggerated discretion. "You two should get going. We have a full evening of movies and popcorn planned, don't we, Munchkins?" The twins nodded enthusiastically, already focused on their upcoming adventure with their favorite babysitter. Their casual acceptance of John and Andrea's date nights was another sign of how seamlessly he had integrated into their lives, a fact that both comforted and occasionally terrified Andrea. "Be good for Tanya," she reminded them, bending to kiss each child. "I love you both to the moon and back." "And we love you to Saturn and back," they chorused, their standard response in their ongoing game of astronomical affection. John squeezed her hand as they walked to his car. "They seem excited for their movie night." "Almost as excited as they were when you took them to the aquarium last weekend," Andrea replied, smiling at the memory of her children's faces pressed against the glass of the shark tank, John patiently answering their endless questions. "I've been thinking about that day a lot," he admitted, as he opened the car door for her, "about how natural it felt, the four of us together." Andrea's heart quickened at his tone, but she kept her response light. "They've certainly claimed you as their own. Zion told his teacher that when he grows up, he wants to be a doctor like my Dr. John." John's face softened with emotion as he slid into the driver's seat. "That's quite an honor." As they drove, Andrea noticed they weren't heading toward the upscale restaurant John had mentioned earlier. Instead, they followed the coastal road that led away from town. "Are we still going to La Mer?" she asked, watching the familiar landmarks of their town disappear behind them. "I thought we might start with a detour," he replied mysteriously. "There's something I want to show you first." The road wound along the coastline until John turned onto a narrow lane that led to a bluff overlooking the ocean. He parked near a small wooden gazebo decorated with fairy lights that twinkled like earthbound stars against the deepening twilight. "John, what is this?" Andrea asked, bewildered as he came around to open her door. "Just trust me," he said, offering, his hand with a smile that made her pulse skip. The gazebo was more magical up close, white lights intertwined with greenery, creating a luminous bower with the vast ocean spread out below. A small table had been set with fine china, crystal glasses, and a bottle of champagne, chilling in an ice bucket. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and rose petals scattered the floor. "You did all this?" Andrea whispered, overwhelmed by the romantic gesture. "I had help," he admitted. "The catering staff from La Mer will be delivering our dinner shortly, but I wanted us to have this place to ourselves first." He guided her to the gazebo's railing, where they stood looking out. Over the darkening water, streaks of purple and gold, still painting the horizon. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and flowers, and Andrea felt a curious sensation of standing on the precipice of something momentous. "Andrea," John began, turning to face her, These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. Mine, too, she admitted softly, meaning it despite the small flutter of alarm in her chest at his serious tone. From the moment I delivered the twins, something about you stayed with me. Your courage, your fierce love for your children, your quiet dignity even in your darkest hour. He took both her hands in his. When I saw you again at the park with Zara and Zion, it felt like the universe was offering a precious second chance. Andrea's heart began racing as John reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "John, please let me finish," he requested gently. "I know it hasn't been very long, and I know you've been hurt before, but some things don't need years to become certain. Sometimes you just know." He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, an oval diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires that caught the fairy lights in brilliant flashes. This was my grandmother's ring. She and my grandfather were married for 62 years. Dropping to one knee on the rose-strewn floor, John gazed up at her with such hope and love that Andrea felt tears spring to her eyes. "Andrea Carell, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I love the way you laugh, the way you protect those twins with everything you have, the way you've slowly let me into your life despite all your fears." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I love Zion and Zara as if they were my own, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving all three of you. Will you marry me?" The perfect moment stretched between them, the romantic setting, the beautiful ring, the good man kneeling before her with his heart in his eyes. Everything any woman could want. And yet, paralyzing fear flooded Andrea's system. Memories of Richard's betrayal crashing through her like a tidal wave. Images flashed through her mind. The positive pregnancy test she'd shown Richard with such joy, his face as he painted the nursery, his empty chair in the delivery room, the devastating text message that had shattered her world. "I can't," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. John's expression froze, hope still visible but now shadowed by confusion. "Andrea, I'm sorry. I can't, John." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she backed away, her hands trembling. "Please get up. Don't kneel like that." He rose slowly, the ring box still open in his palm. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "Whatever you're afraid of, we can face it together." "You don't understand," she said, wrapping her arms around herself, as though physically holding her pieces together. "I thought I was ready, but I'm not. I can't do this again, trust someone that completely build a life on promises that might be broken." "I am not Richard," John said firmly, hurt evident in his eyes, but his voice remaining gentle. "I would never—" "Richard promised forever too," she interrupted, memories overwhelming her rationality. "He looked me in the eyes and vowed to love me through everything, just like you're doing now. And then he left, when it got too real, when the fantasy of family collided with the reality." "That's not fair," John replied, closing the ring box with careful fingers. "You're judging me for another man's betrayal." "I know," Andrea admitted, tears flowing freely now, "and that's exactly why I can't say yes. I'm still broken, John, still haunted by what happened. You deserve someone whole, someone capable of trusting completely. And the twins," her voice broke, "they adore you already. If we married and it didn't work, it would destroy them. So you're rejecting what could be the best thing for all of us because of what might go wrong." Frustration edged into his, a voice for the first time. "Andrea, that's letting fear make your decisions." "Maybe it is," she acknowledged, her heart breaking at the pain in his eyes. "But I need to be certain, not just for me, but for Zion and Zara. They've already lost one father figure. I won't risk them losing another." John stood very still, processing her rejection. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but tight with emotion. "I understand you're scared. I understand why, but I'm not going anywhere, Andrea. You and I love those children. This proposal doesn't have an expiration date. He carefully placed the ring box on the small table. This is yours whenever you're ready, whether that's next month, next year, or never. He took a deep breath. I promised myself when we started dating that I would always respect your boundaries and your pace. I'm keeping that promise now. His understanding only made Andrea feel worse. A man like John deserved absolute certainty, not her damaged heart and fragile trust. I should go home, she whispered, unable to bear the pain she'd caused him. At least let me drive you, he insisted, maintaining his composure though his eyes revealed his devastation. The drive back to her apartment was conducted in heavy silence, broken only when John pulled up outside her building. The twins will be disappointed if our regular Saturday morning breakfast is cancelled, he said quietly. Should I still come? His concern for the children's feelings, even in the midst of his own heartbreak, undid her completely. Andrea reached across the console to touch his hand. Of course you should come. They love you, John. That hasn't changed. And you? He asked, finally looking at her directly. Has that changed? No, she admitted, fresh tears gathering. That's what makes this so hard. I do love you. I'm just not sure I know how to do this right. He nodded once, accepting her confused state with more grace than she deserved. When you figure it out, I'll be here. Later that night, after relieving Tanya and checking on the sleeping twins, Andrea curled on her bed and gave in to the sobs she'd been suppressing. The memory of John's face when she'd rejected his proposal would haunt her for a long time. The hope draining away, replaced by hurt he'd tried valiantly to hide. Her phone chimed with a text message. Wiping her eyes, she read John's simple message. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need. The twins enjoyed their movies and said to tell you good night. I love you, Andrea. That doesn't change because you're not. Ready to hear it. Fresh tears spilled as she read his words. How had she found this man, this impossibly patient, understanding man, only to push him away out of fear? And yet, even knowing she might be making the biggest mistake of her life, Andrea couldn't bring herself to call him back, to accept his proposal. The wounds from Richard's betrayal ran too deep, the fear of repeated abandonment too ingrained. She fell asleep clutching her phone, torn between gratitude for John's understanding and despair at her own inability to embrace the love he offered so freely. In her dreams, she stood again in that beautiful gazebo, but this time when John asked his question, she found the courage to say yes. Chapter 7. The Return of the Past. 6 months had passed since Andrea had rejected John's proposal under the stars. 6 months of careful navigation as they attempted to maintain their relationship while respecting the boundaries Andrea had established. John had kept his promise, continuing to be present for both her and the twins, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, though the ring box remained in his bedside drawer, a patient reminder of his unwavering feelings. Higher, Dr. John, higher. Zion squealed as John pushed him on the playground swing. Autumn had painted the park in brilliant oranges and reds, a perfect backdrop for their Saturday afternoon outing. Andrea watched from a nearby bench, camera in hand, to capture Zara's determined climb up the spider-web structure. Despite the lingering awkwardness between them, these family outings had become a cherished routine. The twins, now 4 years old, had blossomed under John's gentle attention, their vocabulary expanding, their confidence growing, their world enriched by his presence. "Be careful, Zara," she called as her daughter reached the top of the climbing structure. "Not too fast coming down." As Andrea focused her camera lens on Zara's triumphant smile, a male voice behind her froze the blood in her veins. "She looks just like you did at that age. Fearless." Andrea turned slowly, disbelief and dread washing through her in equal measure. Richard Taylor stood before her, more polished than she remembered, in an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide its wear at the cuffs. His smile was as charming and practiced as ever, though new lines around his eyes suggested the past 4 years hadn't been entirely kind. "What are you doing here?" she managed, instinctively glancing toward the twins. Relieved, they were still engrossed in their activities with John. "Is that any way to greet your children's father?" Richard asked, settling uninvited onto the bench beside her. "I've been trying to call you. I blocked your number after you missed the twins' birthday. Again." Andrea shifted away, putting distance between them. "You can communicate through the lawyer if you ever decide to catch up on your child support." Richard's smile tightened, the first crack in his polished facade. "That's actually why I'm here. I've had some financial setbacks. I was hoping we could renegotiate the payment schedule." "Financial setbacks," Andrea repeated flatly. "Is that what you call it, when your girlfriend spends all your money and leaves you?" A flicker of anger crossed his face before he masked it with practiced charm. "I see you've kept tabs on me." "Small town," she replied, though in truth she'd heard nothing about Richard or Sophia in years. His reaction simply confirmed what she'd already suspected. He wouldn't be here otherwise. The Richard she remembered never looked back unless he needed something. "Sophia and I are taking a break," he admitted, adjusting his gold cufflinks, likely the last remnants of his former prosperity. "Things got complicated, but that's not why I came back, Andrea." He leaned closer, his cologne triggering unwanted memories. "I've missed you. Missed the kids." "The kids have names," Andrea said coldly. "Zion and Zara. Children you've seen exactly 3 times in 4 years. "I want to change that," Richard insisted, reaching for her hand. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Andrea, about what matters, about family." The words might have once made her heart leap with hope. Now they rang hollow, rehearsed, like lines from a script he'd prepared for this performance. Andrea pulled her hand away as though burned. "Don't! Mommy! Look at me!" Zion called from the swings, his legs pumping as John pushed him higher. Richard's gaze shifted to the playground, narrowing when he spotted John. "Who's that with my son?" "Dr. John," Andrea replied, deliberately withholding details. "A friend." "Looks friendly," Richard observed, a hint of possessiveness in his tone that he had no right to claim. "How long has he been around?" Before Andrea could answer, Zara spotted them from the climbing structure. She froze, staring at the stranger, sitting beside her mother with open curiosity. Then, with characteristic boldness, she scrambled down and marched toward them. "Who are you?" she demanded, stopping directly in front of Richard, hands on her small hips. Richard's expression softened as he took in the little girl, a miniature version of Andrea with his eyes. "I'm your daddy, sweetheart. Don't you remember me?" Confusion clouded Zara's face. "My daddy doesn't visit. He lives far away." The simple statement, delivered with a child's devastating honesty, caused Richard to flinch visibly. "Well, I'm here now," he said, his smile strained. "And I've brought presents for you and your brother." Andrea placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder, recognizing the familiar pattern. Richard's absences, always followed by extravagant gifts, rather than the consistent presence their children actually needed. "Zara, why don't you go tell Zion to come over? We need to talk to your father." As Zara ran to fetch her brother, Richard turned to Andrea with renewed determination. "They've gotten so big. Zara looks exactly like you." "Children tend to grow when you don't see them for years," Andrea replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. John had noticed the newcomer by now, his posture alert as he watched. Zara whispered something to Zion. With the protective instinct Andrea had come to rely on, he led both children toward them, his expression wary but composed. "Everything okay?" he asked Andrea, positioning himself slightly between her and Richard. "John, this is Richard Taylor," Andrea said stiffly, "the twins' father." Recognition and something darker flashed across John's face before he extended his hand with professional courtesy. "Dr. John Douglas, Pediatric Emergency Medicine." Richard shook his hand briefly, sizing him up with an assessing gaze that lingered on John's casual but clearly high-quality watch and the relaxed confidence of a man secure in his place in the world. "Doctor, huh? How do you know my family?" The possessive phrasing made Andrea's jaw clench. "John is my—" She hesitated, their complicated status momentarily tripping her up. "I'm a friend of the family," John supplied smoothly. "Zion, Zara, why don't we give your mum and dad a minute to talk? I think I saw an ice cream truck by the entrance." The twins, sensing the tension but lured by the promise of ice cream, allowed John to guide them away after receiving a reassuring nod from Andrea. Once they were out of earshot, Andrea turned to Richard with cold fury. "Let's be clear. You don't get to show up after years of absence and claim us as your family. You lost that right when you abandoned me in labor." Richard had the decency to look uncomfortable, though Andrea couldn't tell if it was genuine remorse or simply annoyance at being confronted. "I know I've made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Andrea interrupted, years of suppressed anger finally breaking through. "You left me alone to give birth to your children while you ran off with another woman. You've provided sporadic child support at best. You've missed birthdays, first steps, first words, everything that matters. Those aren't mistakes, Richard. Those are choices." "I want to make it right," he insisted, reaching for her hand again, his expression shifting to the contrite, boyish look that had once melted her defenses. "Sophia's gone. I've been re-evaluating what's important. And it's you, Andrea. It's always been you and the kids." The words she might once have longed to hear now rang hollow. What happened? Did Sophia finally realize you'd leave her too when things got difficult? Richard's expression hardened, his charm falling away to reveal the self-centered man beneath. "It wasn't like that." "No. What was it like then? Did she spend all your money, get tired of your charm? Or did you simply realize being a bachelor isn't as fun when you're broke?" His flash of anger confirmed her suspicions. "You always did think the worst of me." "No, Richard, I used to think the best of you. That was my mistake." Andrea stood, gathering her camera bag. "If you genuinely want to be part of the twins' lives, we can work something out. Supervised visits, gradually increased as they become comfortable with you. But if this is about money or getting back together, you can leave right now." Richard stood as well, smoothing his expensive suit with practiced nonchalance that couldn't hide the fact that it had seen better days. "I've changed, Andrea. I know I hurt you, but people deserve second chances. We were good together once." "We were never good together," Andrea replied, the clarity of hindsight sharpening her words. "I just couldn't see it until you left." John was returning with the twins, each clutching an ice cream cone. Richard's gaze shifted between Andrea and John, noting their unspoken communication with narrowed eyes. "So, you and the doctor," he said quietly. "Is it serious?" Andrea considered the question, watching John help Zara with a dripping cone while making Zion laugh. "That's none of your business. They're my kids. Who's around them is absolutely my business," Richard countered, a hint of the controlling behavior Andrea had forgotten emerging in his tone. "Now you're concerned about their welfare. Where was that concern for the past 4 years? Andrea shook her head in disbelief. "John has been more of a father to them in 1 year than you've been their entire lives." Richard's face flushed with anger, his mask of charm cracking completely. "I'm their real father. Nothing changes that. Not your boyfriend, not time, not distance." "Biology isn't what makes a father," Andrea replied. "Presence does, love does, consistency does." The twins reached them before Richard could respond, ice cream smeared around their smiling mouths. Zion approached Richard cautiously, studying him with serious eyes. "Are you really our daddy?" Richard knelt to the little boy's level, his charm returning full force. "I am, buddy, and I've missed you very much." Zion considered this with a child's gravity. "Then why don't you visit us? Dr. John visits us all the time, even when he's tired from the hospital." The innocent comparison landed like a physical blow. Richard's smile faltered as he glanced up at John, who stood protectively near the twins, but remained silent, allowing the family moment to unfold without interference. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Richard said, choosing his words carefully. "But I'm here now, and I brought presents." He reached into his jacket pocket, producing 2 small wrapped packages. "Would you like to open them?" Andrea nodded her permission, and the twins accepted the gifts with polite thanks, a behavior John had modeled for them repeatedly. Inside were expensive electronic games that made their eyes widen with excitement. "These are very advanced for 4-year-olds, Andrea observed, reading the age recommendation on the packaging, 8+. "They're smart kids," Richard dismissed her concern. "And these are the hottest toys this season." John cleared his throat. "The twins have a no-screens rule before bedtime," he said mildly. "It helps with their sleep patterns." Richard's expression darkened. "Is that right? And who made that rule?" "I did," Andrea interjected firmly, "based on their pediatrician's recommendation." "Sounds like you've got a lot of rules," Richard remarked, his charming facade slipping further. "Zion, Zara, wouldn't you like to come spend a day with me? We could go to the amusement park, eat whatever we want, stay up late. No rules." The transparent attempt to position himself as the fun parent while undermining her authority struck Andrea with painful familiarity. It was the same dynamic that had characterized their marriage. Richard, the playful, indulgent one, Andrea, the practical killjoy, who had to enforce boundaries. John's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, respecting Andrea's authority as the twins' mother. "That won't be possible today," Andrea said firmly. "If you want to establish visitation, we can do that properly, through the courts, with a schedule that works for the twins." Richard's smile disappeared completely, revealing the petulant expression she remembered from whenever he didn't get his way. "I don't need a court to tell me when I can see my own children." "Actually, you do," Andrea countered, "especially since you haven't been involved in their lives or consistently provided support." The twins watched this exchange with growing discomfort, instinctively moving closer to John, whose steady presence offered security amid the tension. Richard noticed their movement and scoffed. "Great job, Andrea. Turn my kids against me while letting some doctor play daddy." "That's enough," John finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Zion and Zara shouldn't witness this conversation." "Stay out of it," Richard snapped. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Andrea corrected sharply. "And John's right. This isn't appropriate in front of the children." She turned to John. "Could you take them to the duck pond for a few minutes?" John hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave her alone with Richard, but nodded. "Come on, explorers. Let's see if those ducklings from last week have grown." Once they'd moved out of earshot, Richard's facade crumbled completely. "So that's how it is? You've replaced me with Dr. Perfect over there?" "You replaced yourself when you walked away," Andrea replied calmly. "And this isn't about John. It's about your sudden interest in the twins after years of absence. What do you really want, Richard?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I told you, I want to make things right. Yes, I've had financial setbacks. Yes, Sophia left. But seeing you again, seeing the twins, it's made me realize what I threw away." "What you threw away can't be reclaimed," Andrea said quietly. "I'm not the same woman you left in that hospital bed. The twins aren't babies anymore. They're people with memories, feelings, and attachments to those who've actually been present." in their lives. Richard's gaze drifted to where John was helping the twins feed the ducks, his patience evident even from a distance. He's really got you all fooled, hasn't he? The perfect doctor, so kind, so caring. His tone turned bitter. Men like that don't stay, Andrea. When things get tough, when the novelty wears off, he'll leave too. Not everyone is you, Richard, Andrea replied, her heart aching not for the man before her, but for the woman she had once been. So trusting, so easily deceived. Some people know how to love without conditions. So you are in love with him, Richard accused, his eyes narrowing. Does he know about your trust issues? How you shut down emotionally whenever you feel vulnerable? How you run from commitment? The sigh. Barb struck with painful accuracy, but Andrea refused to show it. I think we're done here. If you want to establish visitation with the twins, contact my lawyer. She turned to walk away, but Richard caught her arm. Andrea, wait. Take your hand off her. John's voice came from behind them, steel beneath its quiet surface. Now. Richard released her immediately, turning to find John standing alone, having left the twins safely with an elderly couple they knew from the duck pond. This doesn't concern you, Doc, Richard sneered. Andrea concerns me, John replied simply. And right. Now you're upset and grabbing her. That makes it my business. Richard laughed without humor. Playing the white knight. Trust me, she won't let you save her. Andrea's damaged goods. Too broken to ever fully trust anyone again. I should know. I broke her. The cruel assessment, spoken loudly enough for nearby parents to turn and stare, hung in the air like poison. John stepped closer, his voice dropping to ensure only Richard could hear him. Let me be absolutely clear. The only person damaged in this scenario is you, too selfish to recognize the extraordinary woman and children you abandoned. Andrea isn't broken. She's the strongest person I've ever known. He moved protectively, beside Andrea, not touching her but close enough to offer support. And those twins aren't just surviving despite your absence. They're thriving because of her incredible love and determination. Richard's face flushed with anger. You don't know anything about us. I know everything about them, John corrected quietly. I know Zion sleeps with his stuffed triceratops because dinosaurs protect you from nightmares. I know Zara's allergic to peanuts, but also hates strawberries just because of their texture. I know Andrea works herself to exhaustion to give those children everything they need, while you contribute less than the cost of that suit you're wearing. Richard took a step back, clearly unnerved by John's intimate knowledge of his family. I also know, John continued, that despite everything you've done, or rather failed to do, Andrea has never spoken badly about you to the twins. She's preserved your dignity, even when you didn't deserve it, because that's the kind of person she is. Andrea touched John's arm gently. It's okay. I can handle this. He nodded, respecting her independence while remaining beside her in silent support. She turned to Richard, composed despite his cruel words. If you genuinely want to be part of the twins' lives, prove it with actions, not speeches. Start by paying your back child support, then establish a consistent visitation schedule that puts their needs first. Not yours, not mine, theirs. Richard's expression wavered between anger and calculation. Finally, his businessman's pragmatism won out. Fine, have your lawyer contact mine. But don't think this is over, Andrea. Those are my children too. Then start acting like it, she replied simply. As Richard stalked away, Andrea felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief, anger, and a curious sense of closure. The man who had once held such power over her heart now seemed diminished, his charm transparent, his selfishness exposed. John placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? Andrea nodded, watching Richard's retreating figure. I am, actually. For the first time, seeing him didn't hurt. She turned to John with new clarity in her eyes. Thank you for what you said, for defending us. I meant every word, he replied, his gaze holding hers steadily. You are the strongest person I know, Andrea. And the twins are extraordinary because of you." In that moment, standing in the autumn sunshine with the man who had defended her so fiercely yet respected her strength, Andrea felt something shift deep within her heart, a loosening of the constriction that had bound her since Richard's betrayal. It wasn't healed, not completely. But as they walked together to collect the twins, Andrea slipped her hand into John's, a small gesture that spoke volumes about the walls slowly crumbling between them. Chapter 8. Second Chances, Second Rejections. The weeks following Richard's reappearance brought unexpected changes to Andrea's life. True to his word, Richard had his lawyer contact hers, initiating formal proceedings to establish a visitation schedule. Even more surprisingly, a substantial check arrived covering several months of back child support, a gesture Andrea suspected had more to do with impressing the family court than genuine responsibility. In stark contrast to Richard's calculated maneuvers, John's steady presence remained unchanged, reliably loving, infinitely patient, and ever respectful of the boundaries Andrea maintained even as they gradually eroded. Tonight, as Andrea prepared dinner in her small kitchen, she watched John sitting, cross-legged on the living room floor with the twins, helping them construct an elaborate fort from blankets and chairbacks. Their laughter drifted through the apartment, warming her more thoroughly than the oven preheating beside her. "Dr. John, we need more pillows for the secret hideout," Zara declared authoritatively. "As you command, Captain Zara," John replied, with mock seriousness, saluting the little girl before heading toward the linen closet. He passed Andrea in the kitchen, pausing to drop a gentle kiss on her temple. "Need any help with dinner?" "I've got it under control," she assured him, leaning briefly into his touch. "Though I'm not sure we'll be able to extract the twins from that fort when it's time to eat." John grinned. "I have my methods, mainly bribery involving your chocolate chip cookies." As he continued his pillow-gathering mission, Andrea found herself studying him with new eyes. The past 8 months since his proposal had been a delicate dance, John never pressuring her yet, never hiding his feelings either. The engagement ring had never been mentioned again, though sometimes she caught him watching her with a question in his eyes that made her heart race with equal parts longing and fear. Richard's unexpected reappearance had forced Andrea to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. His cruel assessment of her as damaged goods had initially stung with its accuracy, yet John's fierce defense had offered a different perspective, one in which her caution wasn't damage but wisdom, her protective instincts not weakness but strength. The timer dinged, pulling Andrea from her reflections. "Dinner in 5 minutes, fort dwellers." Predictably, the twins protested until John whispered something that made them scramble from their blanket palace with suspicious eagerness. When Andrea raised a questioning eyebrow, he merely smiled innocently. "I might have mentioned that cookie consumption is directly proportional to vegetable consumption." "Sneaky," she approved, setting the casserole on the table. Dinner with John had become comfortably routine, filled with the twins' animated recounting of preschool adventures and John's genuinely interested questions. Tonight, however, Andrea noticed a subtle tension in his posture, an occasional distant look in his eyes that suggested preoccupation. "Everything okay?" she asked as they cleared the table together after the twins had been excused to continue their fort construction. John hesitated, then nodded. "Just thinking about something." "Actually." He glanced toward the living room where the twins were deeply engaged in their play. "Would you be up for a walk after they're asleep? There's something I'd like to talk about." Andrea's pulse quickened with instinctive anxiety. "That sounds ominous." "It's not," he assured her quickly. "Just important." The evening routine proceeded normally. Bath time, story time, and finally tucking 2 tired explorers into bed. Tanya arrived to babysit, settling comfortably on the couch with a textbook for her nursing classes. "We won't be long," Andrea promised, pulling on a light jacket against the spring evening's gentle chill. "Take your time," Tanya insisted with a knowing smile that made Andrea wonder how obvious her complicated feelings for John had become to outside observers. They walked silently through the quiet residential streets, eventually reaching the small neighborhood park where moonlight silvered the empty playground equipment. John guided her to a bench overlooking the duck pond, its surface mirror-smooth in the darkness. "So," Andrea began when the silence stretched. "Too long. What's on your mind?" John took a deep breath, turning to face her directly. "I've been offered a position at Massachusetts General, Chief of Pediatric Emergency Medicine." The news hit Andrea like a physical blow, stealing her breath. "Momentarily. Massachusetts, that's on the other side of the country." "It is," he agreed quietly. "It's an incredible opportunity, one most doctors would jump at." "When would you start?" she asked, already calculating the distance, the separation, the loss this would mean. "For her and the twins, that depends," John said, his eyes never leaving hers. "On you." Andrea's confusion must have shown on her face because he reached for her hands, holding them gently between his own. "Andrea, I've respected your boundaries for 8 months. I've tried to give you the space and time you needed to heal, to trust." "Again," his voice grew husky with emotion, "but I need to know if we're moving forward or simply standing still." "You're giving me an ultimatum?" she asked, pulling her hands away defensively. "No," he replied firmly. "I'm asking for clarity. For all of us, you, me, the twins. Richard's back in the picture now, pursuing his parental rights. Everything's changing, and before I make this decision, I need to understand where I stand in your life." The realization of what he was really asking washed over Andrea. "You're not taking the job." "Not if there's a future for us here," he confirmed. "But I can't keep living in this limbo, Andrea. It's not fair to either of us." The moonlight caught the planes of his face, illuminating the man who had become so central to her life, to the twins' lives. The thought of him leaving created a hollow ache in her chest that she couldn't ignore. "I don't want you to go," she whispered, the admission feeling like surrender. John's expression softened with hope. "Then give me a reason to stay." Andrea knew what he was asking for, the commitment she'd been unable to make 8 months ago on that starlit gazebo. The same fear rose within her, but now it competed with a different kind of terror, the prospect of losing him completely. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice small in the darkness. "I know," he acknowledged, "but at some point, you have to decide if what we could have together is worth facing that fear." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar velvet box. Andrea's heart stuttered as he opened it to reveal the same beautiful ring, his grandmother's sapphires still catching the moonlight in brilliant flashes. "I'm not going to kneel this time," he said with a gentle smile, "but the question remains the same. Andrea Carell, I love you. I love your children. I want to build a life with you, whether that's here or in Massachusetts or anywhere else on this planet." He held the ring between them, an offering rather than a demand. "I'm not Richard. I won't abandon you or the twins when things get difficult. I won't break promises or betray trust. I can't guarantee that life won't throw us challenges, but I can promise that I'll face every one of them by your side." A cascade of emotions flooded Andrea as she stared at the ring, longing, fear, hope, hesitation. The decision before her wasn't just about accepting or rejecting a proposal, it was about choosing which fear was stronger, the fear of trusting again or the fear of watching him walk away. "The twins would be devastated if you left," she said, her voice catching. "And you?" John asked softly. "I would be too," she admitted, finally meeting his gaze directly. "More than I can express." "Then why are we still having this conversation, Andrea? Why is it still so hard for you to believe in us?" The gentle challenge in his voice forced her. to confront the wall she'd built around her heart, a wall constructed of Richard's betrayal, but maintained by her own fear. "Because I've spent 4 years protecting myself and the twins from pain," she whispered. "And loving you, truly loving you, means being vulnerable to that pain again." "Yes," John agreed simply. "Love always means vulnerability, always means risk. But Andrea, a life without risk isn't really living. It's just existing." His words echoed through her, striking a chord of truth she couldn't deny. She had been existing rather than living, surviving rather than thriving. The safe cocoon she'd built around herself and the twins had protected them, yes, but it had also limited them. Andrea reached toward the ring, her fingers hovering inches from its glittering promise. She could almost feel the weight of it on her finger, could almost see their future together. A home filled with laughter, more children perhaps, holidays and ordinary days shared with this extraordinary man who had appeared in their lives like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was saying. And yet, "I need more time," she finally whispered, her hand falling away from the ring. "I'm not ready. I'm so sorry." The hope in John's eyes dimmed, though he maintained his gentle smile. "I understand." "Do you?" Andrea asked, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "Because I'm not sure I do. I love you, John. I know I do, but something inside me freezes when I think about marriage, about trusting that completely again." John carefully closed the ring box, returning it to his pocket. "You don't trust that I'm different from Richard. It's not that simple," she protested, a tear escaping to trail down her cheek. "I trust you more than anyone. It's marriage itself that terrifies me, the vulnerability, the potential for loss." "The thing about potential loss," John said quietly, "is that it's directly proportional to what you stand to gain. Great love always carries risk." The wisdom in his words resonated painfully. Andrea reached for his hand, needing connection even as she created distance. "Will you take the job in Massachusetts?" The question hung between them, charged with implications neither wanted to face. "I don't know," he admitted. "I have 2 weeks to decide." "And if you go?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What happens to us?" John's eyes held hers, filled with love and resignation. "I don't believe in ultimatums, Andrea. If I take the position, we can try long distance. The twins can visit during school breaks. We can see if time and space bring clarity." The pragmatic solution should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like the beginning of an ending, the slow unraveling of the family they had almost become. "And if that doesn't work," she pressed, needing to hear the worst possibility spoken aloud, "then we'll know it wasn't meant to be," he said simply, though the pain in his voice belied his acceptance. "But I will never simply disappear from the twins' lives. That's a promise I intend to keep, regardless of what happens between us." Andrea believed him completely, which only made her rejection more painful. Here was a man willing to maintain his commitment to children who weren't biologically his, even if she couldn't commit to him. The contrast with Richard couldn't have been starker. 2 weeks, she repeated, the deadline suddenly looming like a shadow over them. "Can we just continue as we have been until then, while I think?" John nodded, his thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "Of course, nothing changes unless we decide it does." But something had already changed. A clock had started ticking, forcing decisions she'd been avoiding for months. As they walked back to her apartment in silence, Andrea felt the weight of what she might lose, crushing her chest. The twins' potential, heartbreak, her own. The future they might have had together, all balanced against a fear that suddenly seemed smaller than the prospect of watching John leave for a new life across the country. Outside her door, John kissed her with gentle restraint, a kiss that felt too much like goodbye. "I love you, Andrea," he said quietly. "That doesn't change because you're not ready to hear it." After he left, Andrea checked on the sleeping twins, their peaceful faces unaware of how their world might soon change. Zion clutched the stuffed dinosaur John had given him for his birthday, Zara's nightlight, a special one John had found that projected stars onto the ceiling, cast a gentle glow across her daughter's features. Every corner of their lives had been touched by his presence, his love, his care. The thought of explaining his absence to them created a pain so acute, Andrea had to lean against the doorframe to steady herself. She wasn't ready for marriage, but was she ready to lose him? To watch the twins lose him? All because she couldn't overcome the scars Richard had left on her heart. Andrea moved to her bedroom window, staring out at the night sky. 2 weeks to decide if her fear of the past was stronger than her hope for the future. 2 weeks to heal wounds, years in the making. 2 weeks to find courage she wasn't sure she possessed. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had rejected John's proposal because she feared eventual abandonment, yet now faced the prospect of his leaving precisely because she couldn't commit. She had created the very situation she had been trying to avoid. As moonlight streamed through her window, Andrea wondered if fear had already cost her the second chance at love she never thought she'd find, and if she would have the courage to overcome it before it was too late. Chapter 9. Facing the Truth. "Mommy, when is Dr. John coming back?" Zion asked, his small face troubled as he pushed cereal around his breakfast bowl. Andrea's heart constricted. 10 days had passed since John's second proposal. 10 days of increasingly strained interactions as the deadline for his decision about Massachusetts loomed closer. She had attempted normalcy for the twins' sake, but children possessed a preternatural ability to sense emotional undercurrents, particularly ones that threatened their security. "He's very busy at the hospital this week, sweetie," she answered, the excuse wearing thin even to her own ears. In truth, John had been giving her space to think, their usual routine of family dinners and weekend outings reduced to brief, awkward encounters where they both pretended nothing had changed. "But he promised to help with our rocket ship model," Zara pointed out with a child's unerring logic. "Dr. John always keeps his promises." The simple statement hit Andrea with unexpected force. It was true. Unlike Richard, whose promises had proven as substantial as morning mist, John had never once broken his word to her children, or to her. Even now, as she kept him in painful limbo, he maintained his commitments to the twins, refusing to punish them for their mother's indecision. "I miss him," Zion added quietly, his lower lip trembling slightly. "Me too," Andrea admitted, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. The twins exchanged a look of such adult understanding that it nearly broke her heart. Later that morning, after dropping the twins at preschool, Andrea found herself parked outside her therapist's office. Dr. Winters had been seeing her sporadically since her divorce, but Andrea had cancelled their last several appointments, unwilling to confront the truths she knew lay waiting. Today, however, the prospect of losing John had become more terrifying than facing her own demons. "I've been expecting you," Dr. Winters said, as Andrea settled into the familiar leather chair. "How are things?" "I'm destroying something precious, because I'm afraid," Andrea confessed 20 minutes into their session, tears streaming down her face. "John has given me everything, patience, understanding, love, and I keep pushing him away." Dr. Winters regarded her thoughtfully, allowing silence to create space for Andrea's revelation. "He asked me to marry him. Twice." Andrea wiped at her tears. "The second time was after Richard reappeared. John's been offered this incredible position in Massachusetts, but he won't take it unless he knows where we stand." "And where do you stand?" Dr. Winters asked, her voice gentle but probing. "I love him," Andrea whispered, the words both simple and profound. "I love him so much it terrifies me." "What are you really afraid of, Andrea? Not the surface fear, but the deeper one. Andrea stared out the window, considering the question that had haunted her for months, that I'll trust completely and be destroyed again, that the twins will be hurt worse than before. Is that what your experience with John has shown you? That he's likely to betray that trust? No, Andrea admitted, twisting her hands in her lap. Just the opposite. He's been completely reliable even when I've rejected him. Then perhaps the fear isn't about John at all. The insight landed like a physical blow. It's about me, Andrea whispered, the realization crystallizing with painful clarity. I'm afraid I don't deserve this kind of love, that I'm not enough to keep someone like him. Dr. Winters nodded, leaned forward slightly. Richard didn't leave because you were insufficient, Andrea. He left because of his own limitations, his inability to commit, to mature, to be the partner and father his family needed. But what if? There are no guarantees in life, Dr. Winters interrupted gently. Every relationship carries risk. The question is whether the potential joy outweighs the potential pain. The session continued, excavating years of buried emotions, the abandonment issues from her father's early death, her mother's emotional distance, Richard's ultimate betrayal. By the end, Andrea felt raw, yet somehow lighter, as though poison had been drawn from an infected wound. You've worked so hard to protect yourself and the twins, Dr. Winters said, as their time concluded. But at some point, protection becomes isolation, safety becomes stagnation. The words echoed in Andrea's mind as she drove to pick up the twins, seeing their faces light up as she approached, the unconditional love she'd never questioned accepting from her children, yet struggled to believe she deserved from a partner. That evening, as she tucked the twins into bed, Zara asked the question Andrea had been dreading. Is Dr. John going away forever, like Daddy did? The innocent query shattered something inside Andrea. Why do you ask that, sweetheart? I heard you telling Aunt Tanya he might move far away, Zara explained, her eyes wide with worry. And you've been crying at night, just like when Daddy left. Andrea gathered her daughter close, overwhelmed by the realization that her children, her precious, perceptive children, had been sensing her turmoil all along. Dr. John has been offered a very important job in another state, she explained carefully. He hasn't decided if he's going to take it yet. Can't we go too? Zion asked from his bed across the room, revealing he'd been listening. The simple question, so obvious from a child's perspective, struck Andrea with its clarity. Why couldn't they go too? What was truly keeping them here except her fear? Richard's reappearance had made her initially cautious about upheaval, but his interest in visitation had already waned, his lawyer's communications becoming increasingly sporadic. The twins' school was good, but not irreplaceable. Her photography, business was portable. The apartment held no special attachment. Do you like Dr. John that much? She asked, needing to hear their feelings directly. He makes the best pancakes, Zion offered seriously. And he never gets mad when we ask questions, Zara added. And he checks under my bed for monsters even though he says they're not real. He teaches us stuff, Zion continued, warming to the subject. And he knows all the dinosaur names. And he makes you smile, Mummy. Not your picture smile, but your real one. Andrea's throat tightened at her son's observation. My real smile, Zara nodded emphatically. The one that makes your eyes crinkly. You do it when Dr. John comes over, even when you're tired. He loves us, Zion stated with a child's certainty. Not like Dad. Dad just brings presents. The simple truth spoken without guile crystallized everything for Andrea. John had earned her children's trust through consistent presence and genuine care, things Richard had never provided despite biological connection. I have a lot to think about, she said, kissing each child goodnight, but I promise, whatever happens, we'll face it together. After the twins finally drifted off to sleep, Andrea sat alone on her balcony, confronting the truth she'd been avoiding for months. Her rejection of John hadn't been wise caution, but paralyzing fear. Not protection, but self-sabotage. She'd been so focused on avoiding the pain of abandonment that she'd refused to embrace the joy of acceptance. So determined to protect her children from potential loss that she'd nearly deprived them of the loving father figure they clearly needed. Her phone buzzed with a text from John. The twins left their favorite books at my place last weekend. Should I drop them by tomorrow? Even now, with their relationship in limbo, he was thinking of her children's comfort. Andrea stared at the message, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity what she'd been risking. Not just romantic love, but the kind of partner who remembered favorite books and checked for monsters and made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Before she could second-guess herself, Andrea typed a response. "Can we talk? Not about books, about Massachusetts." His reply came immediately. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes stretched eternally as Andrea paced her apartment, rehearsing words that seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what she needed to express. When the doorbell finally rang, her hands trembled as she opened it. John stood there looking exhausted, the strain of their uncertain future evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. Yet his smile at seeing her remained unchanged, that same warmth that had gradually thawed her frozen heart over the past year. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping back to let him enter. "Always," he replied simply, the single word an unintentional reminder of his consistent presence in her life. They sat on the couch, an unfamiliar awkwardness between them, until Andrea gathered her courage and spoke. "The twins asked me tonight. If you were leaving forever," she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "They compared it to when Richard left." Pain flashed across John's features. "I would never—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "That's what I realized tonight. You've never given me or the twins any reason to doubt your commitment. The only one creating barriers has been me." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the vulnerability coursing through her. "I've been so afraid of being hurt again that I couldn't see I was hurting all of us by refusing to move forward." John remained silent, his expression carefully neutral, though hope flickered in his eyes. "Zion asked why we couldn't go to Massachusetts with you," Andrea continued. "And I didn't have an answer, because there isn't one. Nothing that makes sense. Anyway," she reached for his hand, needing the physical connection to complete her emotional one. "I don't want to lose you, John, not because I'm afraid of being alone, but because I love who we are together, who I am when I'm with you." His fingers tightened around hers, but still he waited, as though understanding she needed to find her way to the conclusion on her own terms. "I've been choosing what felt safe over what could make us truly happy," she admitted. "But I'm realizing that safety without love isn't really living, it's just existing." The truth, finally spoken aloud, hung between them like a tangible thing. No longer a barrier, but a bridge. "So what are you saying, Andrea?" John asked, his voice husky with emotion. "I'm saying yes," she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes to you. Yes to us. Yes to whatever future we build together, whether that's here or in Massachusetts or anywhere else." The joy that transformed John's face was like sunrise, breaking through storm clouds. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace both fierce and tender. "Are you sure?" Andrea nodded against his shoulder. "For the first time in years, I am completely sure. I love you, John, and I'm tired of letting fear keep me from telling you that every day." "What about the ring?" he asked, drawing back to search her face. Andrea smiled through her tears. "I think you should keep it safe until I've earned it properly, until I've shown you that I'm really ready, not just saying words." John cradled her face between his hands with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Andrea. I've always seen your heart, even when you tried to hide it." As he kissed her, a kiss that felt like coming, home, and setting out on an adventure all at once, Andrea finally understood. Love wasn't about guarantees. It was about courage. The courage to risk pain for the possibility of joy, to choose hope over fear, to trust not just another person, but yourself and your own capacity for resilience. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, not because they could predict the outcome, but because they had chosen each other deliberately and with full awareness of both the risk and the potential reward. And for the first time since Richard's betrayal, Andrea felt not just loved, but truly free. Chapter 10. Full Circle blossoming Northside Medical Center buzzed with its usual morning activity as Andrea navigated the familiar corridors, her hand clasped tightly around a large cardboard box. The twins skipped ahead, excitement visible in every movement as Zara clutched a smaller package wrapped in silver paper. "Remember, it's a surprise," Andrea reminded them in a hushed voice. "So we have to be very quiet until we're ready." 3 months had passed since the night Andrea had finally said yes to a future with John. In that time, John had declined the Massachusetts position, instead accepting a promotion at their local hospital. They'd settled into a new rhythm as a family. John's house becoming their shared home, Andrea converting one room into a photography studio, the twins delighting in the backyard tree swing John had built for them. Today marked exactly 4 years since their first meeting in the park, the day John had saved Zara's life with his quick thinking and EpiPen. Andrea had been planning this moment for weeks, her heart racing with nervous anticipation. "Miss Carell, they're waiting for you in room 304, the nurse at the station informed her with a knowing smile. The hospital staff had enthusiastically embraced Andrea's plan once she'd explained it. "Is he there?" Andrea whispered. "Dr. Douglas thinks he's meeting a new patient family," the nurse confirmed. "He has no idea." Andrea took a deep breath, smoothing her yellow sundress, the same one she'd been wearing the day of Zara's allergic reaction. "Ready, Munchkins?" The twins nodded solemnly, understanding the importance of this mission. They'd been practicing their roles for days. Room 304 was the same maternity room where Andrea had given birth to the twins, where John had first met her at her most vulnerable, where he'd left the single white lily that had become their symbol of hope. She'd chosen it deliberately, bringing their story full circle. "Wait here until I call you," she instructed the twins, who positioned themselves obediently outside the door. Andrea entered alone, catching her breath at the transformation. The sterile hospital room had been filled with white lilies, hundreds of them in crystal vases, creating a fragrant garden where medical equipment normally stood. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and twinkling lights had been strung along the walls. John stood with his back to the door, examining a medical chart, unaware of the floral wonderland surrounding him. "I'll be with you in just a moment," he said without turning, his voice carrying the professional kindness that had first caught Andrea's attention. "No rush, Dr. Douglas," she replied softly. "We have all the time in the world." John froze at her voice, then turned slowly, his confusion giving way to astonishment as he took in both her presence and the transformed room. "Andrea, what is—" "4 years ago today," she interrupted gently, setting down her box on a nearby chair, "you saved my daughter's life in a park. You probably don't remember the exact date, but I do. I remember everything about that day. The color of your running shoes, the calm in your voice, the way you knelt beside us without hesitation." She stepped closer, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "But that wasn't really the beginning of our story, was it? Our story started right here, in this room, 8 years ago. When you delivered my twins and saw me at my most broken." John's eyes glistened as recognition dawned. "The maternity room," Andrea nodded, "where you left a white lily and a note that said the most exquisite blossoms often grow from the harshest conditions." She gestured to the flowers surrounding them. You were right, Andrea, John whispered, clearly overcome. What are you doing? She moved to stand directly before him, taking both his hands in hers. For so long, I defined myself by what I'd lost, by Richard's betrayal, by my broken heart. I built walls to protect myself, never realizing they were becoming a prison. Her voice wavered slightly with emotion. Then you came into our lives, first as the doctor who helped bring my children into the world, then as the stranger who saved Zara, and finally as the man who taught me that love is worth the risk. Andrea reached into her pocket and withdrew. A small velvet box, not the one containing his grandmother's ring, but a different one. She opened it to reveal a simple platinum band. You've asked me twice to marry you. Now it's my turn. John's eyes widened as Andrea slowly knelt before him, reversing their roles from that starlit night at the gazebo. Dr. John Douglas, I have loved you through my fear, through my doubts, through my healing. But today I love you without reservation or condition. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her voice remained clear. Will you marry me, raise these children with me, build a life with me that honors both where we've been and where we're going? For a moment, John seemed unable to speak, tears tracking silently down his face. Then he pulled Andrea to her feet, cradling her face as though she were the most precious thing he'd ever held. Yes, he whispered against her lips. 1,000 times, yes. As they sealed their promise with a kiss, Andrea called out, "You can come in now." The door burst open as the twins raced in, Zion carrying a handmade sign reading, "She finally said yes," and Zara carefully balancing her silver package. John laughed through his tears at the sign. "Did you help plan this?" he asked the twins, kneeling to embrace them. "Mommy said we had to keep the big secret," Zion announced proudly, "even when you made dinosaur pancakes and tried to trick me into telling." "We have something for you," Zara added, presenting the silver package with ceremonial importance. John unwrapped it to find a small white box containing a boutonniere, a single white lily, identical to the one he'd left beside Andrea's hospital. "A bed 8 years earlier, for the wedding," Zara explained. "Mummy says it's your special flower." Andrea reached for the cardboard box she'd carried in. "There's one more surprise," she said, opening it to reveal a small photo album. "The twins and I made this together." John turned the pages slowly, photographs documenting their journey from the first candid shot Andrea had taken of him with the twins at the playground, through holidays and ordinary moments, ending with a recent family portrait of all four, of them beneath the old oak tree in their yard. "Our story," he whispered, understanding the gift's significance. "The beginning of it," Andrea corrected, leaning against him as the twins examined the flowers with delighted curiosity. "We have many more chapters to fill." Later that evening, after a celebratory dinner with the hospital staff who'd helped orchestrate the surprise, John and Andrea sat on the porch swing of their home, watching the twins chase fireflies across the darkening lawn. John slipped his grandmother's sapphire ring onto Andrea's finger, where it caught the last golden rays of sunset. "No more walls," he murmured, kissing her temple. "No more walls," she agreed, leaning into his embrace. "Just open hearts and second chances." As if understanding the significance of the moment, the twins abandoned their firefly hunt to join them on the porch. Zion climbed into John's lap, while Zara settled against Andrea, the four of them fitting together as naturally as puzzle pieces, finally finding their matching edges. "Are we a real family now?" Zara asked, her small fingers tracing the sparkling ring on her mother's hand. "We always were," John answered before Andrea could, his voice certain. "This just makes it official." Andrea met his eyes over the children's heads, seeing in them everything she'd once feared to hope for. Not perfect. Fairy tale love, but something far more valuable, a love built on choice rather than chance, on healing rather than hiding, on courage rather than fear. From the broken promise of her past had blossomed this unexpected future, a second chance at love she never thought possible, and a family forged not through obligation, but through deliberate daily choice. As twilight settled around them, Andrea silently thanked the woman she had been in that hospital room 8 years ago. The heartbroken mother clutching newborn twins, determined to protect her wounded heart at all costs. Without her strength, her resilience, her fierce love for her children, this moment would not exist. The white lily John had left beside her bed that day had been both a comfort and a promise. That beauty could emerge from pain, that endings could become beginnings, that sometimes the most exquisite blossoms truly did grow from the harshest conditions. And as her family gathered close on the porch of the home they now shared, Andrea knew with absolute certainty that this particular blossom, this love, this family, this second chance, had been worth every moment of the journey.